So we're into now, what is that, this October will be 2 years, which is crazy. So we just had the year anniversary with Tobias has been helping for the past few months co-hosting. Tobias works at Travelbird, and I'll let Tobias introduce our first speaker.
Cool, amazing, super nice that you're all here. Tonight we're going to speak in this super nice building in the former church about feedback. Every time we organize this bi-monthly, and every time we choose like a different topic. And this time we choose feedback as topic because as salespeople we tend to like push a lot of information, and I'll always ask like our prospects or partners in what they're doing. So we arranged 3 super nice speakers to talk a bit about that subject. And the first one will be you from this book. All right. Well, first of all, welcome at our church. It's a sacred place, as you know, so no flaming this evening. It's really nice to welcome you all here, and this night is all about feedback in sales, and I would definitely not call myself an expert. So what I will do is to give a little bit more of a background story on desk bookers, and I'll end up with some, let's say, basic open door tips of how you can better manage feedback in your sales process to make you more successful. Luckily the 2 other speakers have way more knowledge about it, and even here in the audience we have some people from desk bookers doing sales. So if you want to learn about a couple of tricks, then you should definitely talk to these people over here. So we have Jelle here, Rens, I see in the back, I see Joline and some other desk bookers people, so it's very nice to have you all here. Firstly, very short about desk bookers, because many of you might not have heard of us yet, which is probably about to change. So at desk bookers we believe that if you want to be successful at work, you have to use the best working space for every activity that you do. So what we want to do is we want to make it easy for you to hire that great boardroom that you need for a couple of hours, or that workspace that you want to do some concentration work for yourself. And we do that by building a platform. It's both a web and a mobile application, and we're helping people to rent working meeting spaces hassle-free without any contract. I thought it would be nice a little bit to tell about our journey. Basically our serious launch was in 2013. We managed to grow quite a bit in 2014. We did some acceleration with the Rockstar Accelerator program in 2015, and this year we are planning to conquer the world. So it's quite a nice list. And also thought that hey, maybe it's nice to actually show some pictures, so you have a little bit of background what we are doing. So this is Frank, he's my co-founder. He's somewhere in the audience, over there. We go back really long time, about 18 or 19 years, high school. We've been friends ever since. We also worked in top sports for 2.5 years together with the Olympic athletes. But we had this brilliant idea based on the vision that the way people work in means actually changing. And what we did is we hired a fancy office. It was in Nijmegen. The building was as beautiful from the inside as it was from the outside. So for those of you that know Nijmegen, this is the building straight in front of the central train station. And we even have some inside pics. This is the team that we had back then, 2013, where we were building in preparation of our launch. Luckily, we also have some footage of the launch. We had a launch event.
That's awesome.
Sorry for the Dutch, but we had a completely Dutch team back then.
Facebook.
It was almost 5 o'clock in the morning. We launched a very painful exercise, but we ended up drinking champagne, so it was pretty good. And then after this, we basically had 2014, and that's the year that we started to grow. We started to work with a coach, and it really helped us to accelerate to, let's say, a substantial business. And these pictures are actually from 2015. That's when we took our company, which was 4 people big at that time. We moved to Amsterdam to participate in the Rockstar Accelerator program. We had this fancy house actually nearby where we lived with 4 guys for 6 months. Two-bedroom apartment, was very cozy.
Four guys,
Yeah.
2-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, it was
Good
we
match.
didn't make love, but also
Sorry.
a bar, so I think it was good. And we had this flag from Nijmegen, of course, and then below you see the floor that we had at Rockstar together with some other startups. I see some familiar faces here as well, so really cool. Yeah, that's actually where we what we did for last March until August, roughly. Here's some pics of Rockstar. We grew the team to 5, which is super big. We had we had demo day, and shortly after demo day we raised our seed round, and we raised a 1.5 million seed round, which is actually quite big for Dutch standards, and was together with 2 of the investors that are already on the picture. On the right hand side is actually Arthur Koster, one of the CMO of Booking.com. He was there for 12 years. And the other guy next to him is Marcel Beemsboer, founder of Emeza, also known as Vakantieveilingen. Also part of the syndicate was, or is, point 9 Burning venture capital firm. So it was really nice to have a big chunk of money, and we could finally grow our team. So that's what we've basically done. This picture is from last, I'd say November or something? September even. Alright, so this was one month after the funding, we grew from 5 to this group, 15 or so. And then at this point we are around 41 people, or 42. So it's going pretty fast. Here we are already in front of the church building, and we've been staying here ever since, renting a couple floors extra every couple months. And here you see a picture with some people of the team. This is actually just half of it, so I can't really show you the rest. Yeah, this is 2016, so what we're trying to do at this point is to grow into other countries as well. We are very active already in the Netherlands, moved into Germany. Now, last week we moved into Spain and France, Italy, Finland and Belgium is coming up next. So we have quite a busy schedule. So far for desk bookers. Because tonight is actually the night about kind of like sales, like hacking your sales process, and more in particular trying to get as much feedback that you need to make a successful sales. Like I said, I'm not the expert, luckily. So I just wrote down like 4 basic tips that you can use in your sales process. So the first, actually, but before you do that, the first one is you have to set yourself up to learn. Basically, if you want to incorporate feedback into your sales process, you have to be very open and you have to put your ego aside, because the feedback that you get can be either positive or negative, and either way you just want to digest it, and you have to be a sponge, really be open to it. So set yourself up to learn. A couple of tips will be around customer development, about nurturing your customers and build trust, so you have like trustworthy relationships. Some things about closing the feedback loop continuously with your customers and clients. And finally, you have to kind of optimize the internal organization to get the best out of your feedback that you get. So I'll go through them like very briefly. Well, this is Mel Gibson. The great thing about Mel Gibson is that he always prepares for war in a really good way. And that's also something that you have to do when you go through your sales process. Preparation is key. So if you want to incorporate feedback into your sales process, for me it means, I can imagine that the definition will be different for everybody, but for me it means that you want to incorporate any kind of information that helps you improve your future sales process. So for me it's not just about the conversation that you have with someone, but it's also any other kind of information that you can extract in some way from your customer. I will get to it a little bit later. First tip. Well, I think one of the great ways to improve your sales is by gathering feedback already before you start the sales process. Of course, it sounds very like open doorish, I guess. But actually, you want to make sure that you already gather learnings about your target audience before you really go out there and do your sale. So, what is your goal? Your goal is basically to interview your target customers because you want to learn more about their behavior, you want to learn more about the pain points that they experience, and you want to learn more about the problem that they actually want to be solved. How you do that? Well, what I think works particularly well is just writing down an interview script, defining your target audience, building a list, and then just calling the shit out of them. So what we did with desk bookers, we had this really nice example of, we thought that desk bookers would be a great product for fast-growing companies. Fast-growing companies, they must need like extra additional space that they can use because they're growing so fast. And I think we kind of blew that idea in about half a day. And how did we do that? Well, we thought, okay, how can we find these fast-growing companies? And in Netherlands you have something that's called FD Gazelle, which is like a list of high-growth companies in the country. It's get published every year, and we just called the first 30 of them, and it apparently turned out that no one really liked the product. And I think it's like super valuable, because then you already like incorporate feedback about your audience before you actually start calling them and trying to do sales. So always try to think, what can I already learn from my target customers before I really want to talk with them about business. Second thing is, well, sometimes you feel when you talk to a customer or a potential customer, a prospect, that that when you want to ask him about some feedback, that he really shuts off to you. He doesn't give you anything. He doesn't let you really room to kind of get the feedback out of him. And I mean, that's a very common issue, I guess. And there are actually not really good ways on how you can solve this. But in general, there are some tips that you can use as a way to get something out of them. One, you really have to love your early adopters. I mean, if you're building your business, you will have that first one free person who thinks that this actually might be a good idea. You really have to nurture them. You take them for dinner, go with them to the cinema. At least make sure you have a really good relationship with them, because then you can extract as much information as you want from them. So really nurture your early adopters. What is always interesting, especially when you're sales, is that sometimes you have this customer who's not really interested in your business, who says like, well, I don't have time for this, and he just hangs up the phone. Those are actually the best ones to get feedback from. I mean, they're the most difficult ones, but you have to see them as a big opportunity, because if they say no to you, they probably will also say no to all your competitors. And I think that's actually a really great spot, because if you somehow can get them by persuading them to tell more about what is actually their issue, why they don't really like your product, that's where you get the real diamonds. So if you talk with this, welcome. Come in. Welcome on Desk Bookers. So if you have these customers or clients that don't really want to work with you, still try to get information from them, because many people will leave them aside, but this is actually where you will get most of the valuable information. Finally, you have to leverage ambassadors. Just as you have those early adopters, or who may be aunts or nephews or someone in your family who actually want to try a product, you also will have ambassadors. And for instance, at Desk Bookers, we have one of our loyal customers is T-Mobile. And it basically started out with one personal assistant having a really good experience with Desk Bookers, and she catapulted us all the way in the organization. And I think that's great. And you always have to look for those kind of people that will try to support you no matter what, and you can try to pick up their information as well by having a really good relationship with them. So not really practical, but it's always important that if you want to extract value out of people, you have to make sure you have a very trustworthy relationship, whether or not you are a client or that he or she doesn't want to be your client. Thirdly, that's actually what I also meant before. When you want to try to collect feedback about your sales audience, try to even include information from them without them really knowing it, that they give you information. So for me, getting feedback is more than just having the conversation on the telephone, because there are actually many different ways with how you can really get information out of your target audience. I think two of them are actually really, well, there are actually different tools that you can use, but two are actually not very commonly used. One is reviews, of course. Reviews is a really good way to get feedback. At Desk Bookers, we always ask people when you went to a meeting room, hey, how did you value this room? What was your score from a 0 to a 10 point base? would you have any other tips to really improve our service? And those are the things that you can already implement, really build into your product, without you really actively having to try to extract feedback out of them. The other one, which is the second picture, is the Net Promoter Score. I'm sure many people of you will have heard of it. It's basically a formula that says, the formula says the Net Promoter Score is the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors. And it's really based on a 10-point scale. So you ask the question, on a scale from 0 to 10, would you recommend desk bookers to your friends, family, relations? If they score 9 or 10, they are one of your promoters. You can say they are ambassadors. If they score 1 to 6, they're like, so they're like easily dropping off. Those are actually tools that you can build into your product that will help you to immediately gather feedback from your customers that you can use in your sales process. Lastly, an example that we also used in desk bookers. Sorry for the Dutch, but it's actually the final page of the booking process, and it says, what kind of person were you when you made this reservation? And you can pick either I was a personal assistant, I was a trainer, I was a coach. But those simple things that are built into platforms like ours or like Booking.com are all tools that help you to really close the feedback loop with your audience on a very repetitive basis. And that's also where basically this picture is from. So you basically want to make sure you have a question.
Sorry, while implementing those loops, did you take into account the feedback which you received from the clients previously, or you made it on assumption that it will just work in the market?
In this case, we already did some research before, and we saw that people were mainly part of a specific customer segment. But you can do either way. I think in general, great ways to test specific features or development things that you want to build is by making like fake buttons on your website, and when people click on it, it basically means that they are interested in somehow in your feature, and then you can basically learn from that and decide whether to implement it or not. So there's actually something that you see quite happen, and after the meeting I can probably send you some examples that show these kind of tricks. But it basically has to do with continuously implementing feedback loops between you and the customer, even after you really had the conversation with the client. All right. Finally, what I think is also very important, you have set yourself up for feedback. You have different ways to really gather the feedback, but you also have to do something with it. And for that, you have to set your organization also up in a way that that everybody is as prepared as possible to capture all these learnings that you get. And not really practical tips here, but some guidance. What we like to do at Deskbook is we try to plan frequent meetings about talking together about the feedback that we get from customers. And it's very important that you listen carefully to your salespeople. So if you're a founder, you're here, you probably have to put this one in your ears, because it's actually those guys that talk to all your customers, and they get the most value feedback out of them because they have a really long relationship with them. But at the same time that the salespeople know what the customers love, you also want to back it up with data. So you want to make sure that you include all kinds of perspectives when you're assessing the feedback of clients. That's actually my most valuable point. To summarize, 4 things that I think are very important when you want to try to collect customer feedback is try to collect feedback already before you start your hiring process or your sales process. Nurture your customers. You have to build trustworthy relationships. Thirdly, you have to make sure that you continuously close the feedback loop. So not only when you talk to them on the phone, but also somewhere in your product, somewhere in your service, try to extract every information that you can get out of them. And finally, you have to make sure that your internal organization is optimized in such a way as that these learnings will get used in the best possible way. And if you do all these things, then hopefully, brings money in the bank. So I mean that's basically what the salespeople are here for.
Oh yeah?
So yeah. So thanks for that. Jeroen of Desk Bookers, we are hiring, so check us out. All right. Thank you.
Maybe we could have a few minutes for questions.
At least so much you try to. Right.
I really like the point of challenging salespeople, especially with data. Do you have a concrete example of how you do that at Desk Bookers?
Yeah, so what we like to do at Desk Bookers is we want to use cohorts of how people use our service, both on the customer side as well as on the venue side. And I mean, basically a cohort tells you how a new group, I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with a cohort, but basically a cohort tells you how a new group of people that have just started recently use or value your service in terms of how they, how many times do they log in, or how many bookings do they make, or in our case, how many bookings does the venue get. And you always want to make sure that the story of the salesperson kind of aligns with what the data is showing. And we have some good examples, some bad examples, but in the end, that's really the essence of the conversation that you would want to have internally. Because if you just listen to salespeople, I mean, they're salespeople for a reason. They can sell you everything, right? So if they're talking with people from marketing, or they're talking with people from development, they will say, I mean, if we have this feature, then it'll go like this, right? so you always want to bring in data that kind of supports, or.
Could one example be, I would assume, so I saw at the end when someone completes a booking, it's like, well, who are you? Are you an entrepreneur? Are you an assistant? Or like, what's your job function? And if the salesperson's saying, well, like, most people that are getting on board are this kind of persona, that's our ideal customer profile.
Yeah.
But if other people are clicking a different button, then maybe their intuition or their assumption might be different than the actual bookings you're getting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so we actually have different personas using Desk Bookers. So we have consultants, but we also have personal assistants, and actually their kind of behavior is like way different. So if then a salesperson would come to me and say, hey, we have to do this because we know that these consultants always make these €200 bookings, then we have the data to show, well, they don't make €200 bookings, they actually make €25 bookings, and maybe the ones that you talk to make €200 bookings, but it's actually an outlier in our data set. So that's really how you want to deal with those kind of conversations. And I think data is great, but also knowing that, but I don't think you should steer like exclusively on data, because knowing what is behind the data is even way more important. That's, I think, where the true conversation between a salesperson and a client comes in. So you will always want to balance between those kind of things. And based on the conversation that you have, you can build new assumptions. Those assumptions you can test together. And I think as a rule of thumb, because in every organization there will be people with different opinions about, hey, we should do this or do this or do this. Please bear in mind, if you want to test hypothesis, you have to throw all your own assumptions out of the window. And you want to make sure that your ego is completely out of it. And you just think, okay, what are we going to test? Even if you don't really like the test idea, it's always good to test it, because then at least you have a really open and clear view on what you're trying to achieve.
Awesome.
First of all, huge congratulations with closing seed round.
Yeah.
Awesome, great job. I'm curious, this might be a difficult question, but like going back in time, if you think about the feedback you received from your customers, what's like a huge aha moment for you? Where you're like, oh shit, we screwed up, or oh shit, this wasn't supposed to work that great like this, or?
I mean, to be honest, I think we're still, even though we're still like, we seem like far ahead with some specific things, we are still learning on a very day-to-day basis. So even before we got to the accelerated program, we actually didn't do anything about our customers. I mean, we spoke to a couple, we had some rough ideas about what they were doing. I think most of the basic learnings that we got is just pure hard work and always asking the difficult questions. What surprised us most, or what actually was our most important aha moment, was that when we shifted from, let's say, freelancers to organizations as our customers, it really opened a lot of new doors for us. Because we figured out, well, basically, if you start a new product, people that are freelancing, self-employed, are actually 9 times out of 10 your first customer, because they kind of know, they don't have to discuss with anyone if they can use your product. But in our case, they were also the early adopters, but they also turned out to have like a very small budget and very limited need for a platform like us. When we moved to large organizations, we saw a lot of potential for upselling them to different cities, different venues, and that's where we had our real first aha moment.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You have quite some sales reps already. How do you make sure that the sales reps are coming with the feedback of the market to you?
I mean, we can talk hours about it later, but we basically have a structure set up in Desk Bookers where we work with circles. It's kind of like holacracy for people familiar with it.
Yeah.
And it works with a lot of bringing up a lot of responsibility at each person, and we have a really structure in place on a weekly basis where we gather all this feedback. So on Monday we have a tactical session, we sit down and we discuss the most important things, and those things we have throughout the organization. So not only with the sales reps, also with development, also with marketing, and also with all all teams combined. And I'm happy to tell you more about it.
And how do you build the structure?
It's kind of like a variation on holacracy. Holacracy is kind of like popular nowadays because it's used at Zappos.
Yeah.
Spring is also using it. So
I used to work at Springers. But Ruben Timmerman is like one of the big ambassadors for holacracy.
it really works. It will become big.
Holacracy was.
Yeah, well,
was
thank you
a
for
rock
speaking and
star.
thank you for hosting us.
All right, you're welcome. Have a good evening.
I just wanted a beer.
Well, it's actually quite cool because we're both, for the next speaker, we're both working in the same industry.
Thank you.
And there was one hotel in Amsterdam, I'm working as a hotel buyer in Amsterdam myself, and there's one hotel which I really want to get in, and I saw that he was supplying that hotel. So I thought,
Which one was that?
House of the Onder.
Oh yeah.
So then I thought like, what is that Oki about? And a mutual friend was like, ooh, I saw that he knew Oki, so I said like, a feedback app? That might be super interesting for this session. So give a warm applause.
I need to connect here, so just keep applauding. Nick?
You sure?
Yep.
Yeah, we got it?
Took him a guess.
Okay, guys. Cool. Nice to be here. Hey, I recognize you. How you doing? So, my name is Eric. I come from Sweden. I studied hotel school in Scheveningen en daarom spreek ik ook Nederlands. Maar ik geef Engels en zakelijk, zo is het helemaal makkelijker voor mij als wij Engels praten. I studied hotel school. I come from the hotel industry, and 3 years ago I did my final internship in Kuala Lumpur for a mystery shopping company, and that was also how I came up with the idea for Oki. Essentially, Oki came up because I was working in hotels, and it was very troublesome for the hotel managers and for the hotel employees to always get feedback on TripAdvisor after the guest had already checked out. So, because the guest was gone, it was really hard to do something about it. So Oki, from the get-go 3 years ago, was an idea on how can we actually motivate guests to share their experiences live from within the hotel and be smart with notifications, etc. to let the hotel know who mentioned something, what was the complaint, and what should you do to solve it. And that evolved into a much bigger product, which is now a communications tool between hotels and guests. But enough about Oki. I think I was asked, like Tobias said, actually to join here because I have a product that very much relies on feedback. But when I got the question and I saw the topic, how to leverage feedback in your sales, to be honest,
It's not something that I've been actively thinking about. So thank you, Tobias and Joan, for inviting me, because it also forced me to really think about, how do I leverage feedback in my sales? And some of the things that I mentioned here are not things that we're actually doing right now, one thing specifically, but because you guys invited me and had me to think about like the helicopter view of feedback in the whole process, it actually helped me like analyze and find a gap where I think we should improve. So that's awesome.
That's awesome.
Give it up for the guys here. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit differently. I'm going to talk about how I leverage feedback. I'm doing sales in Oki. How many startups are here today? It's like 50%. And like, do any of you sell to hotels? Just so I know. What? Okay, so are you all desk bookers or? Oh, you are the music streaming. Yeah, okay, cool. I want to talk about, because that's what came to me when I had to think about this. Like, okay, so how do we leverage feedback? How I see it is like, you have a demo. I'm going to call it demo. It's like a demonstration when I demo Oki. You have a demo with a potential customer. What is the feedback that you can yield from that meeting in order to progress and do sales even better? Then you have the sale. I'm going to give some concrete tips on how you can turn a no into a yes. And also why you should actually make a good mark of why a customer started with you, because there can be many different reasons even if you have one solution. Then how to leverage feedback from the onboarding process by having a super tight communication with your customer success team. And finally, how to leverage feedback from a live customer. And basically, what happens is that in a sales process, even if I'm only actively here, I'm benefiting from all of these things because it all comes back to me in terms of referrals, so I don't have to do cold calls all the time. So that's nice. Some of you saw this on your LinkedIn. I thought it was a nice thing to do. So I sent this to some of you. I saw that you're coming to the Sales Hacker event tonight. That's awesome. I'll be talking about how I use feedback in sales. I was wondering what specific expectations you have from this presentation. Maybe I can tweak it to also talk about what matters most to you.
How many replies did you get?
Like 5, I sent like 10.
Badass.
Wow. But, so there were obviously a lot of you that I didn't connect with. So, when you think about this, what do you want to learn from this presentation? Something.
The no into yes sounds really good to me.
Or what you're going to do with it. The
Do with what?
The feedback. Because you're asking for feedback. So yeah, what is going on after the feedback? You get feedback, you get some information.
How do you actually use it?
How are you going to use it and start changing it into useful things?
Cool.
And
Okay.
how are you gonna get 10 out of 10 replies next time?
Badass.
Being more in advance. Yeah?
So I'm interested when you get too much feedback, how you effectively look at your process right now, and because that's the problem. What I think some people might have is that when you get too much feedback, it becomes like a mountain, and you block yourself. Like, I'm not going to use this anymore. How do you channel it into effectively changing what you're already doing?
Okay. Like super short answer there. If you're channeling it well, then too much feedback is never.
No,
like a theme.
that's the point.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you effectively channel?
Okay, cool. Yeah, last one then.
My question would be actually to how to teach our salespeople to use CRM when they are making a sale.
You're the ones who wrote the long answer to
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. What's your name again?
Shamil.
Shamil. Okay, so Shamil, I think it's an awesome example. Like, I send this out having no idea if any of you are going to reply, and 5 of you do. And Shamil wrote a long story about his startup and the needs that he is looking for in terms of sales. And that's awesome, because I can talk about so many things about feedback, but if it matters something to you, then I'd rather talk about it like that. So what you said were 4 different things. Communication, so in terms of how can we improve the communication, the dialogue between the salespeople and the customers. How can we increase customer satisfaction thanks to leveraging feedback? How can we basically make sure that we don't have to do cold calling anymore and leverage feedback in order to increase referrals? And one guy called Stefan said, and anything interesting. So that's also one part of it. Okay,
So it starts with meeting a potential customer. Like how I open up every demo is that so you have to put yourself in the shoes of this hotelier. So I'm gonna use Oki as an example the whole way. It's easier. So it's a general manager, is the decision maker from a hotel. I meet with him. What does he know about Oki from before? He's been on our website. He's seen the presentation that I've sent him. But to be honest, maybe 50% of them don't even go on our website, 50% of them don't even go and look at the presentation. A very nice tool for you to use when you send presentations is called docsend.com. So DOCSCS, yeah, docsend. You can see when they open your presentation how many seconds they spend on each page. It's very useful. But what they all have in common is that they've talked to me on the phone and they have agreed to meet me, yeah? So I always open up the communication by asking, if you were to explain Oki in your own words, what would that be? And what that answer gives me is feedback on my pre-sales efforts. Because if some people say, I have no idea what you do, then I understand that my presentation sucks. And if they say exactly what we do, then I understand that I've been doing a really good job in leveling expectations and understanding why I'm actually at the meeting. The second part is about live designing your pitch. And to be honest, if we're mostly salespeople here, we want to keep our job fun, right? So it's all about keeping it like real and changing it all the time. I would be so bored if I had to call on the same sales pitch all the time. So I'm continuously evolving it. And what I mean with point 2 is like, look, I think Joella is going to talk more about this, and that's I'm very interested to hear. But it's all about looking at the people that you're talking to. So Jacob, you look at me intensely right now, means that you're probably interested. But someone else is looking down on their phone, maybe they're bored. But these are like small things you really need to pick up on. Because you have the moment now to sit with a decision maker, and this is your moment to be on the podium. So it's super important to live design your pitch. And when you find that little piece of your solution that they are really excited about, try to get more open-ended questions about that specific part. What I like to do is, let's say for example, we do upselling for hotels also before arrival. And then I like to say, okay, so what kind of services would you upsell in your hotel? And then they're thinking, oh, we could do room upgrades, we could do late checkout, champagne. And what's the cool thing then is that they are actually thinking about how to use Oki and not whether if they want to use Oki. So that's already like one step ahead. And it's also by leveraging feedback and just making sure you keep them happy and excited. The third one is, I think, the one that is by far the most difficult for me. I've become way better at it, but in the beginning especially, it was really hard. I know that I talked before to you, some founders that are just starting your company. And I know how, I don't know, I can't think of a better word, but how horny you are to get customers, you know? So you are very likely to actually overpromise and say, I'm going to give you the world, and when you actually know that your product isn't really capable of doing that yet. What I want to say is just that don't do that, because you're really shooting yourself in the foot. When we launched Oki, I would usually overpromise and say, yeah, we got features that I knew was on the roadmap, but they weren't live for maybe a couple of months. Then I would come back after the sales meeting, how did it go? It went great. You have to build this, dear developer. And they're like, oh my God, Eric, again? So I never do that anymore. But what I realized was that even if it got me like a short-term sale, it would never ever get me a long-term referral. Because these guys, these hotels, when they went live thinking that we had something that I had promised, it turned out that we couldn't deliver on it, then they were actually much, much more unhappy. And maybe it turned out that they even said something bad about Oki to someone else, and you know how hurtful that is. So really keep in mind, always under promise. Like one example that we have is that, so we're generating money for hotels. Let's say that an average hotel is paying 100 euros a month for Oki. Then we know that the average return on investment that they make is 800. So it's like eight times the return on investment. So now when I meet hoteliers and I ask them, so okay, what return on investment are you happy with? Then they say 3 or 6, usually sometime between 3 and 6. And then like before, I would have instantly said, not a problem, we're going to generate 8. But now I just smile and I chill and I say, okay, that's good, we can meet that.
And then when they triple or quadruple that number later on, you're gonna have a super, super, super happy customer. And that's gonna lead to referrals, which is gonna make sure that you don't have to cold call anymore. Finally, in the end of every demo, I always ask this question. So, did this presentation meet your expectations? That's a really nice thing to do. Like, I used to ask, do you have any questions? But that's like an open-ended, and most people are like in a hurry and they don't give a shit. But if you ask that question, did this presentation or meeting meet your expectations? You will always, at least in my experience, you will hear that they're actually, if they needed some more information, they will tell you. And then if you don't have time, you can just follow up via email. Really powerful way to just make sure that you get the most of your time with the decision maker. Okay, any questions on that? We can do a little question stop and just let me know. Okay, this is something super cool. I think you're all gonna love this. I mean, latest today I got a note from a hotel.